Everyone loves Pokemon. From your well-meaning yet ultimately name-butchering grandmother to that little clump of lard Kyle that tricked you into trading a super cool Dark Charizard for a 30 HP Tenta not so cool and a pair of blue energy cards on the playground yesterday. Never trust a Kyle. And between Legends of Arceus? I don't know. And between Legends of Arceus commanding the attention of every gamer this side of Saffron City earlier this year, and the announcement of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet alerting your collective imaginary girlfriend to their newest obsessions, Weed Cat, Apple Croc, and Trump Duck. Seriously, I already know what starter I am not picking. Pokemon is clearly still king of the monster collecting, turn-basting, elementally strategizing JRPGs. Or whatever. Influence. I grew up loving the Pocket Monsters. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with the anime, had a crush on Misty, and in hindsight now realize that Team Rocket, of all things, informed way too many of the character tropes that I still like to see in fiction, and the confidence I now have in my own identity and how I express it. I mean, come on. TLDR, monsters are cool. Every pre-evolution weeb was into tsundere tomboys, and I personally discovered that it was okay to want to be both Jesse and James. Beyond spawning my evergreen obsession with Japanese cartoons, alongside classics like Dragon Ball, Cowboy Bebop, Sailor Moon, Yu Yu Hakusho, Great Teacher Onizuka, and Slam Dunk. I mean, listen to this. I spent countless childhood hours killing rats in Kanto, no-lifed my way through Emerald, Heart Gold, and Platinum on multiple occasions, complained about the limitations of Sword, Shield, Brilliant Diamond, and Shining Pearl while still committing 40 plus hours to all of them, and my love of Fat Pikachu beating unsuspecting fools to death with a surfboard led me later in life to discover one of my favorite gaming franchises of all time, Megami Tensei. And, unlike any of my friends at the time, I liked playing the spin-offs. In fact, I would go so far as to say that I preferred the spin-offs. I played the minigames in the first Pokemon Stadium more than the actual game, just so I could prove that I was smarter than that bitch Jigglypuff. And you call yourself a professor? It definitely wasn't because I preferred and still usually prefer to play games by myself, and as such had nobody to duel with. Definitely not. I spent months playing Pokemon Snap, over and over again, throwing things at wild animals and cataloging the abuse like some sort of twisted serial killer, because it taught me that the things I do in a virtual world matter, that the actions I take can actually change the outcome even in a game that is quite literally on rails. Little me thought that was so cool. And it was, and was recently proven to still be. I used to beg my mother to take me to the local game store so I could log a frankly disgusting amount of hours into Pokemon Channel, a game that arguably doesn't even deserve one. And to this day, Pokemon Coliseum is my favorite Pokemon game. And Espeon and Umbreon are my favorite evolutions as a result. Hell, I even like its sequel, XD, despite its pre-Tumblr emo kid summoning title, much less cool protagonist, and whitewashing of Or's resident dancing badass Mirror B. I guess they couldn't resist taking the moonwalking Michael Jackson reference a backward step too far. And the not actually a sequel, but probably should have been Battle Revolution, which, while disappointing to an overwhelming majority both then and now, I will still defend, because it fulfilled my childhood desire to accessorize, customize, and gladiate. And while I haven't played every spin-off title, content creators are still making videos and live streaming playthroughs of Pokemon Ranger, Pokemon Unite, Pokken Tournament, Detective Pikachu, Shuffle, Picross, and Dash, and even Pokemon Troze, of all games. I myself look forward to playing Pokemon Conquest sometime in the future, since I missed it as a kid and it looks right up my strategy, tactically, RPG-y loving alley. And of course, Legends of Arceus, while far from a perfect game, has done its part in evolving the stale Pocket Monster formula. Point is, there's plenty of love to go around for games that aren't part of the main series, and I for one hope that this trend continues for a long time, as long as Game Freak and the Pokemon Company start to do things like, care about user experience, production value, and, their own player base. But that would be too much to ask now, wouldn't it? Pico Pina. You may have noticed I left out a particular sub-series of games from that list of spin-offs. And no, I'm not talking about the Sega Pico. I refuse. And no, I am not talking about the Advanced Picobina. I refuse. And no, I'm also not talking about Pokemon Go either. I've never played it and I have no intention to. I left this series out of the list so far because a little while ago, I started playing Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team for the very first time. That's right, I had never played what is probably the most beloved, and certainly the longest running, Pokemon spin-off ever. I vaguely remember a girl in my class mentioning how much she loved the games, and I vividly remember gazing longingly at the cover of any Mystery Dungeon game I saw at the rental store, because I was so enamored with the cute bandanas they wore around their necks, and their expressive, expressions. I mean, look at them. They have so much personality. The whole thing radiates charm. Truthfully, I think that's what makes all of the spin-off games so memorable and loved. Maybe even more so than the main series because, let's be honest, the main games are severely lacking in charm. Especially in comparison, and especially in visual charm, interactivity, and variety. And I'm not saying they don't have any charm at all, of course they do. But it's just not the same scrolling through endless, unvoiced text boxes and clicking the same attack repeatedly until the animal in front of you is dead, when you could do all of those same exact things, but also play fun mini-games, take cool pictures, do cool combos, see your best friend's expressions change in 3 dimensions, explore open worlds, solve actual puzzles, and give Pikachu the biggest, bestest pets for bringing you weed. And you'll notice these things have slowly, been and are being integrated into the main series of games. Hell, even Arceus is an obvious testing ground for a new direction of Pokemon games. So much so that technically it's considered a main series game despite the individuality of everything about it and its marketing. I can only hope that Scarlet and Violet live up to that and add in even more features that the side games have already had for decades. But coming back to Red Rescue Team, for those of you who are like me and have never played these games before, you're probably wondering, what is a mystery dungeon? The dots. They're connected. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, of course, has been going strong since 2005 with 11 games. 3 of which are WiiWare games that never had an official English release, were removed from the digital shop, and would require becoming a goddamn Yonko to even begin to think about playing. 4 anime specials, 4 separate manga, and they remain the only side games to release with paired versions similar to the core series method of unapologetic capitalism. And now, our programming. So, now that I'm done edging you, I should probably play the game, huh? But first, here's a quick rundown. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon began with a pair of games, Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team, just like the originals, but with one major difference. Red came out on the Game Boy Advance, and Blue released on the Nintendo DS. Why? I don't know. I couldn't find anything concrete as to why this is, only speculation and vague, almost incomprehensible assumptions hidden deep within the bowels of Pokebase forum threads. If you're wondering what the actual differences are, there's not many. There are a handful of version exclusive Pokemon as usual, but you can readily get them in the other version by typing in an easily found Wonder Mail code, so not very exclusive. Other than that, Blue's soundtrack is a bit improved, there are more buttons to press, and since the DS has 2 screens, you have an easily accessible map and/or party list, and that's it. Also, fun fact, when Blue first released in Japan, it came with a bug that when you played it, it deleted all of the data from any Game Boy Advance game you had in your DS bottom slot, except for Red Rescue Team, which it left completely alone. Bug. Sure, if that's what we're calling it these days. The pair also got remade recently for the Switch as Rescue Team DX, and a weird Korean-only PC demo called Gold Rescue Team also existed, apparently. I felt like playing Red Rescue Team, so I did.
And now, our programming. For real.
Welcome! This is the portal that leads to the world of Pokemon. But before I can let you through, I have several questions for you. I want you to answer them sincerely. Are you ready? Okay, let the interview begin. That's right, this game begins with a personality quiz, because nothing screams fun for children like asking them to do some inner reflection and analyze their own half-written character. Your answers to this quiz will determine which Pokemon you start as because, spoiler alert, you play as a Pokemon. Awesome. You can end up as any of the starters from the first 3 generations: Pikachu and Eevee, Meowth, Psyduck, Cubone, Machop, and Skitty, with each question and each answer to the question giving you points towards a certain Pokemon nature, such as hardy, quirky, or sassy. And while the questions cycle through on every startup, there are guides that can help you get your favorite on the first try. I was gonna go this route and use a guide, but ultimately I decided against it and answered sincerely since the game so kindly asked me to. Sorry, T. Ferguson. I know you put your whole T for Gussie into this guide all the way back in 2006, but your services won't be needed today. I decide to laugh at foreign people, sacrifice a doll to a broken bungee cord, and then also myself because obviously become the Joker, stand up to bullying, accept my lot in life as weird but funny, thanks game, have an existential crisis in my involuntary isolation, say fuck studying, expose my anxiety disorder, and pretend to be a boy. The game thinks about this therapy session and decides that I am the docile type, very kind-hearted, very helpful, able to make friends with anyone, and then calls me a wonderful person. Thanks, game. And I'm a Bulbasaur now, so fuck yeah. After this, the game allows you to pick a partner from the remaining region starters, minus the ones that are the same type as you. And after I spend about 5 minutes contemplating my fate, I decide to go with Mudkip. And now I have to name him. After cycling through such graceful names as Vitiligo, Kimdup, Bobobo, Stussy, Poncho, and Durst, I decide to go with Ike because that's my smash main. And also because Mudkip is such a handsome boy. Get it? EK? EK? EK, man? Never mind. Where am I? Am I dreaming this? I feel a pleasant breeze. I hear a voice from somewhere. I wonder who it is. Ike wakes me up. introduces himself, and oh yeah, we're actually an amnesiac human trapped in a Bulbasaur's body. That's right, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is an isekai. Ike then proceeds to roast me like a marshmallow at 7 PM on a mid-June evening, calling me utterly normal in every possible way, and saying, you're kind of weird. The two sentences that lonely gamers with individuality complexes love to hear. We then get to name ourselves, which I should never be allowed to do. And then this little fucker says that I have a funny name. Ugh. I can't win. It's at this moment that a cry for help pierces the clearing, and a lone Butterfree floats in to admit to us that she is the worst parent to ever parent, and her baby Caterpie has fallen into a fissure in the ground in a forest that is not this one, and that she has left him there alone. They're just handing out best mom mugs these days, huh? So we go to the appropriately named Tiny Woods, learn how to play the game by pressing all of the buttons, exploring our first dungeon, and killing every sentient being that stands in our warpath to save one. The thing you need to know about Mystery Dungeon games is that they're kind of turn-based. Every time you do an action, say, move one tile or do an attack, everything else on the map also gets to do an action. This means that nothing moves until you do, which can be a bit tricky to get used to, but also means that you have plenty of time to scour the menus, think about your next move, or just go get a snack. You also automatically recover HP a little bit as turns pass, can pick up items off of the ground, get a regular attack that does less damage and gives you less experience if you kill something with it, but it doesn't cost any PP, meaning it's unlimited. Unlimited PP. And also there's this thing called belly, which the game doesn't really explain, but basically means you get hungry as you explore and use moves, and if your belly reaches 0, you start to take damage until you starve to death in the depths of a dungeon far away from home and all of your loved ones, who will most likely never discover your fate. Like I said, charming. Also, you can only control one Pokemon, and that's you. Bulbasaur, in my case, and you have to raise your teammates' IQ by giving them type-associated gummies, and then assign different tactics to them if you want them to switch up their playstyles. Anyway, I bulldoze my way through some Wurmples. Ike learns Mud Slap. I slam my head into a bunch of walls because I don't know what I'm doing yet. Get put to sleep like 5 times by these smug little refrigerator rejects, and finally save the Caterpie, who is crying for his mommy, whom we are not, which is probably for the best. We take him back to his beauty pageant of a mother who pays us in berries instead of money, the cheap fuck. And the Caterpie stares at us like we're heroes, which we are, unlike his mom. Ike asks us to come with him and then gives us a house for free. This is likely because it is the clearest way to let the player know this is fantasy. He makes it sound like we're going to be living with him, but then starts mansplaining to us about how a mailbox works, and oh, also, there's earthquakes happening all the time, and oh, also, he doesn't live here. And I thought he wanted to be roommates. He then asks us to join a rescue team with him, doesn't explain what that even means or entails, and then declares that we will be the best to ever do it. We accept. I mean, obviously, who could pass up a deal like that? I, again, have a tough time naming our team, but ultimately settle on Team Solar, because Team Soulless is both too ominous and too much about me, and because Team Photosynthesis sounds dumb as hell. And also because Team Solar Juice wouldn't fit. I know that somewhere out there in parallel universes, Team Moist and Team Fuck are committing the very best rescuing a Mon could ask for. So proud. We're greeted by a second title screen, which is objectively the best presentation move any game could make ever. We wake up the next morning, still a Bulbasaur, in our cute little grass house that I honestly love. It makes me feel like weed royalty. It's even got windows. We go out the door to find Ike sleeping in our front yard like a jilted ex-lover who doesn't understand boundaries, and after we wake him up, he starts crying about not having any job offers in the mail. Like, of course we don't. How is anybody supposed to know? I don't even think you filled out the paperwork. It's just irresponsible, man. Don't be like Ike. We do, however, get our rescue team official badge in the mail, which I guess means we're government employees now, along with a toolbox and a copy of the Pokemon news, which I can only wonder about the logistics of. Suddenly, a Pelipper flies by and drops something new and mysterious into our mailbox. Ike tells me to go get it, even though he's the one freaking out about it, so I do. But not before the game sasses me first. Well played, game. Anyway, apparently, Caterpie has friends. Shocker, I know, and some Magnemite are in need of help. An electromagnetic wave surged through the area and it stuck together Magnemite and Magnemite. That's not enough to form a Magneton, from Magnemite's friend, who is also a Magnemite. Can I just say that I love that these weirdos talk in all caps? Hella vibes. So we assume the position and open our mouths to receive the sluice of the Sun God and head off to Thunderwave Cave, where the Magnemite are stuck down on B6F. Alright. We spent a lot of time chasing down Poochyena, who are cowardly bastards, and stepping on wonder tiles because I have no idea what they do yet. We then discover the best item in the game, Graveler Rock. And from now on, Ike will start spraying the rock chop at anything that moves like a goddamn psychopath. We get the weakened status from an Elekid on a lower floor and do some light reading that finally tells us what wonder tiles do. They heal status effects. Also, there are diagonals in this game? Nice. Once again, Ike and I are lauded as heroes in the way that heroes are always lauded, with empty words instead of feasts. But this time the Magnemites give us 500 Pokebucks, so that's something. Also something called a Reviver Seed, which I'm sure is useless. We'll probably never need it. Protagonist. During that night's sleep, we do the thing that every amnesiac protagonist must do to earn their rightful place in Valhalla. We have our first cryptic dream about the past. We really are a hero. Ike finally decides to show us around town, Pokemon Square, where we meet the eclectic Kecleon brothers, who are basically a Pokemart but weirder, especially the shiny one on the right, who is a self-proclaimed auteur of moves and orbs and frequently cooms about how gorgeous and elegant smashing rocks can be. Gulpin, who is basically a move rememberer who can also link together your moves so you can use multiple in a single turn, but spoiler alert, I ignore him for the entire game because that sounds complicated and my brain is smooth. A Bellsprout, Snubbull, and Lombre, who are citizens wandering about town that tell us stuff like, "Oh no, there was a forest fire not long ago," and "I don't know why, but there have been many natural disasters lately," and that these disasters are causing Pokemon to lose their shit and get so scared they become violent. You know, easily missed statements that are ominous and or reflective things that probably aren't important and have no bearing on the story and mean nothing. There's also a Persian that runs a bank, racist, an empty dojo to the south, the Pelipper office to the east, and a wish cache chilling in a waterfall giving out sage advice, racist. And my favorite, a Kangaskhan who lets us store our items in her house and calls us honey and sweetie. Thank you, mommy. One small frustration I have with the game already is that for storing and retrieving things from MommyCon, the game allows us to select multiple items. But when we're buying or selling anywhere else in the game, we have to select them one by one. Not a huge deal, but a little annoying. Ike and I head over to the MDPS to pick up some optional missions that we can do to gather items, level up, raise our rescue team rank by earning points, move time along as days pass, and get rewards. And help people out, I guess, if that's what you're into. I'll admit that it took me longer than it should have to figure out how to actually accept a job request, but again, smooth. Most of these missions consist of bringing easily found items to Pokemon that live unreasonably deep in a dungeon, rescuing them because they're lost or weak and we are strong and own a map, or escorting them to their friend who's just chilling in dungeon B15F for some reason. We do a few missions and have another protag vision where we identify that the strange voice we heard in the first one is actually a Pokemon, and they're talking to us, but we can't make them out clearly. We're woken up by a violent shaking and yet another voice that we can hear but not see, except this time, it's a Dugtrio who doesn't respect our property and pops out of the ground right in the middle of our living room. Wait, is it even our property? Ike gave it to us for free, but was it even his to give? Did we sign any paperwork? Are we squatting? Don't think about it too much. They seem pleasant and polite enough, though, and tell us that their son, Diglett, was abducted during the earthquake last night, spirited away to the peak of a tall mountain. I truly don't want to know about the logistics of that. The horrors of what was exposed to the sky that night cannot be fathomed. The Dugtrio then disappears without letting us get a word in edgewise, only to reappear to say the same exact things to Ike outside. And now we're off to Mount Steel to kick Skarmory's shiny metal ass. Dugtrio meets us at the entrance for a nanosecond to tell us that the peak is 9 floors up, then fucks off again. It's time for us to vine whip our way into war criminal status as we commit unbridled pokecide yet again. This is the first time we see the environment change as we progress through the dungeon, which is a nice touch and adds some visual variety to these dungeons. Also, the Mount Steel song fucks. We pick up some loose change and arrive at the peak of the mountain, but not before something weird happens. Somehow, Ike gets separated from us, and even though his tactics are set to let's go together, which means he should be following us, he does not even attempt to rendezvous. Instead, we go down our own separate warpaths. I'm not complaining, as the camera cuts away to get some cool shots of Ike actually fighting for once, but if he had died, I would have been very upset. This isn't the last time something like this happens either, and it does become a bit frustrating. Though for the most part, it's just funny enough that I don't really care. At the peak of the mountain, we find Diglett alone on a platform, trapped on the opposite side of a cliff. And finally, we come to our first boss fight. This boss room is actually pretty cool in a simple way. I think it looks neat, with the church window-esque cave entrances in the background, and the dangerous chasm ahead complete with cracking cliff edge really ties the whole place together as something dangerous to those who aren't careful. Skarmory flies down to talk to us before battle, and it's here that we find out that he's not really malicious at all. Rather, a massive idiot who thinks that there are so many Digdugs chilling underground miles away from his mountain that their sheer numbers are causing the earthquakes, and now he's gone full conspiracy theorist and lost his whole shit. Honestly, this fight wasn't difficult at all. The guides I used were giving tips and hints as to type effectiveness and what to watch out for and, actual strategy, but I ended up soloing the bird brain despite my super weakness to flying type attacks, while Ike whipped out the Pokepuffs and watched from the back line, adding nothing once again. Go team. Skarmory runs away like he's half Poochyena or something, and although the fight is done, Ike and I can't get across the chasm to poor Diglett. Luckily, our Magnemite friends come to save the day. They don't really say how they do this, but I like to think that they each get on one side of the Diglett and use their opposing polarities to create a mini magnetic field where Diglett can just sort of hover along. This doesn't actually happen, but I wish it did. We arrive back home where Diggs the Prophecy makes an astounding revelation. He has feet, and judging how Ike and the Magnemite react to this, we could not see them when we were rescuing him, which leads me to wonder, how did we actually get this little guy off of the mountain? Like, surely we would have seen them floundering around in the air, right? Right? Because the horrors of these implications are too much for all of us, Ike quickly brushes these thoughts aside. Dugtrio ruins our lawn yet again to thank us for our help, and Magnemite says aloud what everyone was already thinking. Ike decides to invite the Magnemite we saved to join our team, Everybody thinks that's a great idea, except they would have to move house a bit closer to us, and so they say no. We have yet another dream, but this time we see Gardevoir, who appears to be doing something, and is related to why we became a Pokemon in the first place. Somehow. And then we go pay a visit to Wigglytuff, and the game teaches us about friend areas. Well, not really, but we know they exist. I think the whole friend area thing is a cool concept that the game does a terrible job at explaining and a mediocre job at implementing. Hopefully, the newer games do a better job of all of this, but for now, let me explain them because the game just sort of doesn't. Mystery Dungeon lets you recruit Pokemon. Good call. But to do so, there are a bunch of requirements that you have to figure out, mostly on your own. First, you have to have the friend area that corresponds to the Pokemon you want to catch. Basically, Pokemon can only live in certain environments, and if you don't own those environments, it's impossible to recruit them. Makes sense. But you don't know what environments are good for what Pokemon until you fight them, so you can't check what friend areas to buy to get certain Pokemon until you already know the Pokemon. Which still makes some sense, but also mostly makes for a tedious amount of backtracking in a game whose main gameplay concept is already based around backtracking. Something the game really does not need more of. Also, every Pokemon has a base recruitment percentage, many of which are incredibly low or even negative, which means you're most likely going to have to grind longer than you would like in order to recruit some Pokemon. If you even have the friend area to do so, which you won't know unless you've already gone to that specific dungeon and fought that specific Pokemon. On top of that, there are a ton of friend areas that you can't even unlock until the post-game, after the credits roll. Also, the recruitment percentages will not activate at all unless you defeat the opponent with your team leader, aka me, aka Bulbasaur. And that doesn't include lasting moves, even if the team leader is the one who used them, meaning if I want a Pokemon prone to running away, say a Poochyena, I can't just Leech Seed them and go about my day until they give up and switch sides. Okay, that last one is kind of understandable, that'd be a little much, but the rest of these things don't really do anything except make for tedious padding. If you're already a heavy grinder or a dedicated shiny hunter, this might not be an issue for you, but for me, even as someone whose favorite genre of game is old-ass JRPGs, the grind-heaviest games in existence, this still frustrated me. I think it's because I could see the vision, I could tell what they were going for, but the implementation did not hit for me. Spoiler alert, my solution was to buy as many friend areas as I could afford in one go like some kind of landlord hellspawn and kill everything in my way to death until the general Pokepopulace gives up and sacrifices one of their own for the greater good, aka me. But Wigglytuff gives us like 4 friend areas for free to start, which is something, I guess. Magnemite ultimately joins our team, and we name him Kanye in a neurodivergent leap of logic which you can attempt to follow along with here. Anyway, as soon as we're done committing property fraud, we notice a kerfuffle in the town square. It is here where we are finally introduced to some other rescue teams, and truly learn that the concept is not just something Ike made up in some sort of hero complex-induced delusion. Which is neat. This Jumpluff is begging this Shiftry, leader of Team Shiftry, which is comprised of a Shiftry and 2 Nuzleafs, the pre-evolution of Shiftry, to help save their friend who is stuck in a place and needs a gust of wind or something like that to blow so they can float away safely. Something Shiftry can do easily with his giant leafy fan hands. Shiftry, a capitalist, refuses to offer his service without price gouging a citizen in need, and makes a big stink about it while the townsfolk watch. Enter Team ACT, Team ACT, Alakazam, Charizard, Tyranitar. The coolest dudes in the game and a gold rank rescue team to boot. They walk in, and Alakazam guilts the Shiftry into helping by reminding him that he, in fact, does have giant leafy fan hands, so it should be an easy task. And with a little status leverage, Team Shiftry runs off to help the trapped dandelion seed. Lombrain tells us about Team Act because we're clearly ignorant, and Ike immediately gives up on having any personal identity or ambition of his own and becomes to Team Act what that neglected Caterpie is to us. That's Charizard. His flamethrower can melt mountains. That's Tyranitar. He takes great pride in his armored body and amazing strength. And that's the leader, Alakazam. He's endowed with an amazing brain and an IQ of 5,000. Endowed, huh? Amazing brain, you say? Oh, and there's a Gengar stalking us. Before we get on to our next rescue mission, I do some optional ones. Heading off to Mount Steel a bunch of times because I want a Medicham, and a Tyrogue, and an Aaron. But I have not yet trial and errored my way to understanding the recruitment system, so I end up wasting like an entire hour because I can't actually catch any of those. Speaking of waste, I decide to try out the Wonder Mail system. This allows you to unlock 4 new dungeons: Oddity Cave, Remains Island, Marvelous Sea, and Fantasy Strait. To my understanding, these are all included in the main game of the remake, Rescue DX, but here are totally optional, and I save them for later. And the Pokemon that are exclusive to the other version of the game, in my case, Magikarp, Lapras, Aipom, Minun, and Porygon 2, though Porygon 2 isn't really that exclusive since you can just catch a Porygon and evolve it. Anyway, I type in a couple ridiculously long codes for Lapras, Minun, and Magikarp specifically, and go try to do their missions, only to find out that I can't actually get Lapras's friend area until the post-game, even though their mission is in the very first area in the game. Minun doesn't join even though I explicitly made sure to buy the right friend area, and I can't even do Magikarp's because it is a B rank mission in a dungeon I haven't gone to yet. I do randomly catch a Zigzagoon named Altoids though. Great. And a Meditite named Onion because, obviously, actually great. After another hour of wasting my time, we reach bronze like a real gamer. The next day, resident fanboy Caterpie shows up on our doorstep and asks us, yet again, to save his friend, Metapod, who is lost in the woods. A Metapod. Lost in the woods. Caterpie, you and your friends are lame as fuck. Before we can agree, that creepy Gengar shows up with his goons, Medicham and Ekans. After playing into Ike's inferiority complex, which, let's be real, isn't really a complex actually, he hasn't done anything so far, Gengar threatens to get a reward from Caterpie's parents, which probably would work knowing his shitty mom, offers Caterpie to join his team if they succeed, challenges us to a race to see who can save the Metapod first, tells us their collective name is Team Meanies, and leaves. Then comes back a couple days later to steal our mail. What the fuck, dude? Eventually, Onion, Ike, and I head off to the sinister woods to foil Team Meanie's plans and save that sorry excuse for a Metapod. We recruit the first Pseudo-Wudo we come across on the first floor because, of course, and Erectus enters the fray. We beeline for the 13th floor where Medicham tells us their real, not delusional at all goal is world domination. And Ekans thinks it's actually a good thing that Caterpie will join their team, and together they'll all grow closer to each other and their ridiculous goal too. Well, hey, at least they're optimistic. They get their ass kicked though. Back at base, Caterpie falls even more in love with us. Him and Metapod both say they want to grow up to be like us, which would be touching if I thought they were capable of surviving that long. The next day, the desperate Jumpluff drops by to tell us that, yes, Shiftry went to save their friend, but now Shiftry hasn't come back either, which is weird because it's supposed to be a simple mission. So we go to this place called the Silent Chasm, where Jumpluff just now decides to tell us that there are legends of a monster that slumbers within. That might have been relevant information before we climbed all the way up a mountain range. Would have been nice to know, you creepy little freak. Apparently, Ike thinks so too because he tries to torch it out by saying he has a stomach ache. I decide to no-and him because I'm not a wimp, and after some arguing, we head into the chasm to solve the mystery. We smash some spiders for a few floors, and it doesn't take us long to reach our destination. We're met by a shaking Jumpluff, freed by Shiftry. But Shiftry is on the ground. He tells us to forget about him and get away from here, like the edgy, cool guy he thinks that he is. And then he gets abducted by a fucking Zapdos. I'm eating this shit up. Call me grandma, cause this is my program. Zapdos tells us that if we want to save Shiftry, he'll be waiting for us at Mount Thunder and gows off. Team Act overhears us talking about Zapdos and joins the conversation. Alakazam says that while Shiftry's wins might have been the trigger for Zapdos' wrath, he's most likely more agitated by the unnatural weather phenomena that have been occurring lately. Team Act decides to take matters into their own hands, but Ike finally decides to take a stand, and together we convince them to let us go along. Alakazam gives in and tells us the plan. The two teams will split up and take different routes through Mount Thunder and reconvene at the peak. Gear up for battle and be cautious. Mount Thunder is 13 floors of getting swarmed by Ampharos, Electrikes, and Electabuzzes. This is the first real challenge we faced so far, but we make it through relatively unscathed to our first save point, where a statue of Mamikon heals us in her cold, stony embrace, as it should be. After the save point, we traverse the outside of the mountain, which is actually pretty cool. The landscape here is nothing but dry ground, dead trees, and murky water pools turned green. It feels dead. And together with the music, this transition helps give a greater sense of importance to the whole thing, adding to this feeling that we've trekked such a long way with our destination almost upon us in a foreboding, are you sure you want to keep going sort of way? And we do keep going, hopeful, in spite of or maybe because of this feeling. I like this part a lot. The peak of Mount Thunder is this dry-looking cliff face, complete with ground spikes, gray, overcast skies, and lightning going off during our dramatic exchange with a legendary bird who threatens us with intense shit like, "I warned you, I have no mercy for meddlers." Ike, in a fit of bravery, overcomes his fear of confrontation and straight up faces down what is essentially the god of lightning, demanding Zapdos give us back Shiftry. Zapdos responds in what is probably the most predictably badass way imaginable. "You must be determined to utter such words, and you shall answer to my great and righteous fury." I answer his answer by immediately sleep powdering him. Aw, look at him all curled up, so cute. Leech seeding him, then sit back paralyzed while Ike gets his shit together and actually does most of the work for once. Erectus sat in the back and did nothing. Typical. Oh shit! He used Mimic and paralyzed the electric bird with his own Thunder Wave, giving us a free turn of Vine Whip, Mudslap, Flail Team combo damage, and ultimately letting us take down the boss with the ease of a rescue team that doesn't bother looking behind them at the lightning striking the cliffside like the badasses they are. We are? I take it back, Erectus. You're goated. Team Act arrives late to the peak, surprised that our lowly selves have managed to straight up bully a god into submission without them. Zapdos literally discharges his negative energy, like that one crystal your girlfriend uses, and gives us Shiftry back. He says he's impressed with us and challenges us to a battle sometime in the nebulous future, where he will finally get to go all out, and until we meet again, we'd better prepare and own our skills so our showdown will be legendary. Full-on shonen anime rival shit, I like this guy. Charizard and Tyranitar are a little suspicious of how a measly Bulbasaur such as ourselves squared off with a straight-up Impundulu. Rightfully so, and Alakazam reveals that when he first met us, he sensed that we aren't exactly what we seem to be. Ike, of course, does not hesitate to divulge all of our spiritual and existential secrets to what are essentially strangers and also Shiftry, who is still here. Alakazam admits that Lombre was maybe exaggerating a little bit. He doesn't actually know everything, but he does tell us that we should head toward this place called the Hill of the Ancients to speak to a future seer named Xatu. Team Solar heads back home, and we, the player, are treated to a neat little exchange between the members of Team Act. Charizard accuses Alakazam of knowing more than he's letting on, which the Big Spoon admits to, and that it, whatever it is, should go unspoken for now, for our sake. Not ominous at all, guys. Not ominous at all. After this, I spent another good hour or so at Makuhita's dojo completing these type-themed training/grinding mazes that it feels like I definitely should have done way earlier. Like, these were extremely easy, and I don't know if they're supposed to be a challenge early on and I just overleveled, or if they're just built for baby mode. But this little guy told me he would give me a reward for completing all of the mazes. He didn't say what that reward would be. I didn't look it up, so I don't know if it's actually worth my time or not still, but I wouldn't be me if I didn't waste an exorbitant amount of time doing something completely optional for the oh-so-enticing promise of nothing. Side note, Makuhita is one of my favorite Pokemon. Hariyama too. One of the highest IQ Shadow Pokemon snags for real. Eventually, we grab Onion and head off towards the Great Canyon, our destination being the Hill of the Ancients on the 13th floor, the home of Xatu. Like most of what's come before, we don't really have a problem with this dungeon. There are a lot of grass poison types like Cacturne and Breloom, so we fit right in. We're so safe here, we go ahead and take a dancing break by the waterfront. What a nice family reunion. We arrive at the top of the canyon and find Xatu, who seems to be ignoring us. Ike gets impatient and a little bit bloodthirsty, but well, I decide against murdering our only lead for information, opting instead to tickle him. I'll just let this one play out. After Xatu finally gives in and bursts out laughing, he commends us on figuring out his identity, lol, and tells us that he can sense I am a human. When Ike asks him how he can tell, Xatu directs our attention to the sun. He says that he spends every day, all day, looking directly into the sun, unblinking, and it gives him sight for all things, including the past and future. I have a feeling there were some kids who played this game back in the day and walked around staring at the sun, trying to gain powers, only to be met with solar keratitis. Xatu explains that our getting trapped in a Bulbasaur's body and the rash of natural disasters that are happening are linked in some way, and he is concerned about the balance of the world. He sees the same future every day, the destruction of the world, and if nothing is done about it, it will no doubt come to pass. At the end of the conversation, the camera slides down and we, the player, get a glimpse of Gengar eavesdropping on the conversation, clearly plotting something. We, the characters, however, have no idea and make it our mission to do what we can about the apocalypse.
Tico, tico, tico. Hehe. Future.
The next morning, Ike comes to check up on us. Obviously, it's a little disconcerting to think that us becoming a Pokemon and the whole world being destroyed are linked, but more than that, Ike has a single burning question on his mind. So, do you know what the world's balance is? No, I have no fucking idea, little man. The usual suspects are gossiping in the square about something, and when we go check it out, they tell us they're talking about an old legend called the Ninetales legend, creative, and rumors are going around that it might actually be true. They direct us toward Whiscash, who should be able to tell us the story. We find Caterpie and Metapod chilling outside the pond, in awe of Wishcash's tales like young children begging for more story time from their grandfather. Very wholesome. We head up to Wishcash, who agrees to tell us the tale. There once lived a Pokémon by the name of Ninetales. Now, Ninetales had many tails, all of them imbued with psychic power. It was said that anyone so foolish as to touch a tail would be cursed for 1,000 years. But there was someone so foolish as to grab a tail, and it was a human. As one might expect, the human that grabbed the tail was subjected to a 1,000-year curse. However, just when the curse was cast, a Pokémon named Gardevoir shielded the human and sacrificed herself to absorb the curse. Taking pity on Gardevoir, Ninetales asked the human this. "Do you wish to save Gardevoir?" it asked. But the human had already abandoned Gardevoir and fled. Ninetales became disillusioned with the human, and it made this prediction. That human will one day be reborn as a Pokémon. And when the human becomes a Pokémon, the world's balance will be upset. That's a lot. The potential for us being a shitty Pokemon abuser in our past life is pretty damn high after hearing that. Ike doesn't take that too well, understandably, and decides to call it a day, but stops to tell us that we're friends, and he doesn't want to doubt us. What a guy. Boingo boingo, it's dream time. This time we try talking to our visitor and they tell us what we already knew. Who's that Pokemon? It's Gardevoir. Gardevoir is glad to finally be able to meet us and talk with us, but she faints out with the line, "I am your..." Our what, Big G, our what? And she's gone. Needless to say, we're feeling pretty bad about ourselves, but Ike reassures us and together we head into town. The whole town has gathered in the square for some reason. Somebody's telling a story or something. And it turns out to be Gengar. He's telling everyone about how he went up to the Hill of the Ancients and how he found out that the Ninetales legend was actually true and that the world is out of whack. And if it doesn't get rebalanced, a great disaster will come and... oh no, this isn't good, is it? After grabbing everyone's attention with his stories, which are true, he starts to throw out the idea that if a human becoming a Pokemon has upset the balance of the world, then surely getting rid of that human Pokemon hybrid will bring about order and safety and normalcy. Surely. He insinuates, and then outright accuses us of being that Gardevoir abusing twice-cursed human and sets the town on us. We don't really have anything to say to defend ourselves, and they turn on us. They straight up attack us, and we have to run away. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. Fuck Gengar. All my homies hate Gengar, and I fucking hate this game for making me hate Gengar because I love Gengar, and now my image of Gengar will be tainted forever. Fuck Gengar. Outside our house, we suggest to Ike that maybe we should break up the rescue team, but he gets mad and decides to stay at our side through thick and thin. Team Act catches up with us and, after threatening us a little bit, lets us go. Alakazam tells us to run, but if he sees us again after the sun rises tomorrow, there won't be any mercy. Gulp. Gulp. I sounded like Goofy when I did that. Gulp. Caterpie also comes to tell us he believes in us no matter what. We're his heroes, after all. And so the next morning comes. Caterpie, Metapod, the Jumpluffs, and even Diglett meet us to say their goodbyes. In the middle of this, Pelipper, the Switzerland of Pokemon, flies overhead and delivers our mail. Ike asks us to read it, and now I'm pretty sure Ike can't actually read, so we do. Take care. It's farewell, but only for now. Until the day I can deliver mail to you again. I'll always be waiting. The wandering postal carrier, Pelipper. And now Ike is crying, the other Pokemon are crying, fuck it, I'm crying, everybody's crying. Thus began Soul's cruel and arduous journey as a fugitive. Over forbidding mountains. Across fields of fire. But throughout it all, Soul's team kept their heads held high. Without a complaint, they marched on. We eventually arrive at Lapis Cave, the funkiest place in the area. Fugitives still being chased by those who were once our neighbors and friends. We plow through pretty easily, though it is a bit tougher with only 2 of us. We make it out the other side, but the mob is still chasing us, so we have to keep running. We see a volcano erupting in the distance and decide that that's the safest place to be. Man, we are not doing so good. Mount Blaze is the single hardest dungeon in the game. In the main game, at least. I struggled with it so much. One hit from anything in this hell pit is enough to flash roast a Bulbasaur. And I'm underleveled, so believe me when I tell you, this place was stressful. But there's no way I was gonna grind the rocky path, or whatever it's called, for hours just to have a slightly easier time. That ain't me. I'm built different. So we head in, and die to the first enemy we encounter on the very first floor. A Slugma, man, a goddamn Slugma. And that is our only Reviver Seed left, and we can't buy more because we can't go to town because we're fugitives. Now we have to climb all of Mount Blaze, the longest dungeon so far, filled with Pokemon that can one-shot me without dying and then fight the final boss at the end. This run was doomed from the start, but we go to the second floor anyway, and oh god, this mountain is also filled with Pidgeots, and if you can't remember your Pokemon typing chart right now, let me remind you. Flying moves are also super effective against grass types, and we almost die on floor 2. This place is my nightmare. We do die on the 5th floor to a pair of Numel and have to start all over. I decide to restart the save because I've played enough video games to know that I'm basically soft-locked unless I make it to the boss with a revive. This second run goes a lot better, and we make it all the way to floor 11, and oh great, another Slugma. I decide here to go down the rock path once just to see, but I get no items, waste the revive because I got cornered, and get next to no experience, so fuck that, I just reset the game again, not worth it at all. On this, our 3rd try, we finally battle our way to the 13th floor, where Mamikon is once again waiting for us with her cold embrace, and we can finally save the game. After this is 3 floors of Summit, 2 regular floors in the boss room. After killing every Arcanine and Fearow on this godforsaken mountain, we finally arrive at our destination. I realize immediately that Ike does not have a berry to heal himself with, so I give him one and take a step back from the Firebird to throw a rock at him, fire off a sleep powder, and it doesn't matter. He's already used agility, immediately breaks out of sleep before we can do anything, and one-shots me with Ember, because of course he can. The no-name 2-bit cronies down on the first floor can fucking one-shot me, of course the Godbird of Fire can. I'm in for a real treat here, huh? I'd like to say we fared a bit better the next time, but we didn't even make it there. I got Fury attacked to death by a Furo, and this isn't the only time that this happens. Now, it might look like I just did the same exact thing every time, but it didn't feel like that. I learned how to effectively utilize party tactics, and I even figured out how to use IQ skills. In Mystery Dungeon, you can feed yourself and your party members type-coded gummies that increase their IQ, and increasing their IQ allows them to access skills that you can toggle on and off that affect how their AI behaves. If you want them to save PP when moves get low, target the enemy with the lowest HP, or check to see if a Pokemon already has a status before using a status-inflicting move, you can make that happen if they have a high enough IQ. And if you're struggling with a particularly strong floor or going up against a big boss, you can click on Exclusive Move User, and now they won't be using the base attack at all for 8 damage all the time, and instead actually using their moves, which, let me tell you, is extremely helpful. And it took learning how to use these systems effectively to get past this long killing hellscape. And then I left Exclusive Move User on for basically the rest of the game. Strategy. After 10 deaths, not all of which were to the boss might I add, a countless amount of sleep powders, and about 2 hours of throwing my head against the wall, I finally brute forced my way through the suffering on the 11th attempt at conquering Mount Blaze. Oh boy, Frozen Forest. There couldn't possibly be a blue-themed ice-type legendary bird living anywhere around here. Just kidding, there is. As we enter the snow-covered wastes, we find Absol staring at us from afar. Then it disappears without saying anything? It's giving early 2000s emo kid turning inward toward their cape as they make a dramatic exit after contributing nothing. Wait, that's just Tuxedo Mask. Anyway, this shit is cute. Look at these trees. These are friend trees. And the Pokemon in here are such a non-issue, they might as well be friend Pokemon. After the 5th floor, we hear some voices. Someone has intruded upon the forest. The enfeebled flow of icy winds Is the intrusion to blame? It must be stopped, for it is to protect the forest. We make it to Articuno without much struggle, and the battle goes pretty well. I mean, we died, but that's not really our fault on this one. Articuno's Powder Snow move is an entire party-affecting move that does enough to kill either one of us in one hit, and while it generally has very low accuracy and misses constantly, when it does hit, it hits both of us at once, at least it tends to. This fight isn't nearly as aggravating as the last though, and it only takes a couple attempts to beat some sense into this fucking bird. After convincing Articuno that we're not here to melt the icy wasteland, with the help of the Absol that's been stalking us, lots of that going on in this game, the bird flies off, and Absol joins our party. I name her Jane because, well, calamity. And then we find out there actually is another elemental mountain, Mount Freeze, and we head out again. Honestly, I felt this portion to be the weakest in the game. While I did think it was neat that the game subverted my expectations by placing the last legendary bird fight not on a mountain after the first two were, the voices coming through as we made it through the floors, and the inclusion of Absol into the story, overall these things felt pretty rushed. The voice cutscene only happens once in the entire dungeon. Articuno, to me, has the weakest motivations for fighting us out of the 3 legendary birds, and of them is the least believable. And Absol is shoehorned in as a plot device to help us progress through the story and then never talked about again. That's right, Absol, the calamity Pokemon, the harbinger of natural disasters, is never talked about, is omitted from party cutscenes, and generally has no effect on the story other than this moment to stop Articuno from killing us, which was never really a problem in the first place. This whole section feels like they threw in some ideas they thought would be cool, but never really fleshed them out afterward. And while it is serviceable, it's not bad, per se. While I was playing through it, I was more caught up in what it could have been. Regardless, we have a vision of Gardevoir on the path and arrive at Mount Freeze. After a few floors, say, 20, we make it to the summit, where Team Act catches up to fight us. We fight for our lives, but are quickly interrupted by the appearance of the Ninetales of ancient legend. Ninetales intervenes, referring to Ike and I as guests, and after some desperate prodding from Alakazam, they tell us that we are not the Pokemon that they cursed all those years ago, though it did happen. We are not a Gardevoir, abuser, or abandoner, and that's pretty cool in my book. Ike thinks so too because he bursts into tears of joy. Ninetales mentions that while they did curse a human into a Pokemon, and they did predict that the world would become unbalanced, the two are not as linked as we were led to believe, and we have nothing to do with it. Ike starts yelling at Team Act to apologize to us, as he should, and it's moments like these where we get to see that Ike really is a true bro. Team Act, of course, responds reluctantly and sheepishly, and Charizard goes so far as to say he believed we were innocent all along. Sure, guy. Yet another earthquake starts and Ninetales is worried. They predict that with all of this earth shaking all of the time, the mythical Groudon will awaken from its slumber beneath the earth. Team Act offers to go fight the Groudon, and Ike obviously volunteers our services, but they turn us down. Groudon is far more powerful than any Pokemon you have faced. Huh? Leave it to us. Huh? You couldn't even catch up to a Bulbasaur and a Mudkip walking slowly through the wilderness, and y'all got fucking superpowers. I don't want to hear it. But we do let them go off without us and return home. Back in town, Gengar is getting pissy that nobody's going after us, because nobody else really wants to chase us through Mount Blaze. I mean, I don't blame them, fuck that place. And they even throw some shade back at him, asking, Why is he not out chasing us himself? Obviously, he has some bullshit answer, and we walk into the thick of it to proclaim our innocence. Gengar starts parroting, proof, 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 because that's obviously the kind of guy he is. We falter a bit here, but Pelipper quickly saves our ass with a newspaper retelling the story with testimonials from Team Act and disparaging Gengar's statements as filthy lies. If nobody got our back, Pelipper got our back. And now we return, safe and sound, to our tiny little home, surrounded by our tiny little friends, with nothing but the end of the world ahead of us.
Not.
We get up to some optional missions because that's what we should be doing in these dire times. The in-game justification for this is that we are waiting for the return of Team Act because surely they can quell the primal fury of the Earth itself all on their own, right? Right. Eventually, we were asked by a strange Why Not Wobbuffet combo to check out the job posting they made on the bulletin board. Apparently, they couldn't tell us about it themselves, but whatever, I'm down. Let's go check it out. We accept a job called Punish Bad Mankey, and Why Not and Wobbuffet immediately appear to tell us all about the mission. I don't know why they made a big deal about having someplace to be, so they wouldn't tell us, but then they instant transmission to the Pelipper office to tell us anyway? I don't really get it, but whatever. Why Not tells us that a gang of Mankey are rampaging around the forest where they live, attacking anyone they come across, and all around being a nuisance to everyone. So we head off to Uproar Forest to deal with some annoying neighbors. Uproar Forest is a walk in the park compared to what we've been up against lately, especially with Jane by our side. And especially because I forgot to turn off exclusive move user on both my friends, and when I realize I leave it on for the rest of the game. And though this place is packed full with C-dots that know Earthquake for some reason, the three of us quickly arrive at the 10th floor, ready to fistfight some Mankey. The Mankey get mad about the dim-witted expression they see in front of them, I assume they're talking about Ike, and enter straight monkey mode. But they each go down extremely easily, they're normal Mankey after all, and we've been fighting legendaries with nothing but a handful of melatonin and our rock collection. We return home to tell Why Not that we've dealt with the issue, but they've been listening to Butterfree and don't have any money to pay us. Instead, they give us a chestnut from the forest because we like risking our lives without due compensation. And oh look, the Mankey have followed us here. Before they can start a fight though, they discover our chestnut and are overcome by their base instincts to eat nut. They ask us nicely for it, and Ike actually uses his brain for once. He decides to have the Mankey help us build a new base in exchange for the chestnut, and they agree. Why Not feels bad about not being able to pay us properly, and Caterpie also shows up, so now the 8 of us get to work on our new headquarters. After some time passes and construction has begun, the Mankey go on strike. They don't want to work anymore. They want the nut. So we have to go back to Uproar Forest and grind for more chestnuts, which is very easy, but also a bit annoying. Heads up, chestnuts can only be found on the 9th floor, nowhere else in the dungeon has them, and I can see somebody playing this without knowing that running in circles across the entire dungeon and wasting a ton of time. So yeah, chestnuts, 9th floor. We get the chestnuts, and now finally, after all of our hard work and dedication, we now have a brand new base that looks just like us. And if I'm being honest with you, this is cool as fuck. I love the little flag, the wooden path leading up to the base, and the fact that the interior support for the windows makes it look like a gigantified version of a long-forgotten Bulbasaur died here, and now we sleep in the hollowed-out remains of its ancient, everlasting corpse. Then the Mankey realize that the work is over and they won't be getting any more chestnuts, and try to tear the whole thing down. I decided to do all of the remaining Makuhita training mazes during this time, And all of them are still extremely easy to beat. You know, they're still built for babies, except for the Psychic Maze. There are no Pokemon in this entire maze that aren't Wobbuffet. In other words, every Pokemon in here is Wobbuffet. And if you've ever fought Wobbuffet, you already know that they are annoying. Destiny Bond, Mirror Coat, Safeguard, Counter, that's their entire moveset. Every single one of them has this moveset, and they use them all at once. And then, you get surrounded by like 4 or 5 of them, there's no escape. This is literal torture, because all I could do was watch as we slowly killed each other by trying to kill them with no reviver seeds in sight. It took me 4 tries to beat the Psychic Maze, when literally every other maze is hilariously beatable. I suddenly was forced to strategize when I went in with full brain off baby's first time playing Tekken button mash mode. And I was laughing my ass off the entire time because of it. Like, this shit's funny. After this, and you guessed it, some more optional missions, we're awoken by more earthquakes. A great sign. Lombre comes running up to us in a fit and tells us everybody is gathering at the town square. Not surprising, that's what a square is for. Shiftry, of all people, has called in all the rescue teams that he possibly could. He's worried about Alakazam and crew, who still haven't returned. And he makes the call to gather together the best of the best from those who've gathered here to form a special rescue team to go rescue the regular rescue team and hopefully beat Groudon while they're at it. We obviously want to go, but Lombre continues to be our biggest hater and tells us there's no way we could handle it. Shut the fuck up, Lombre. Up steps Blastoise, the quote-unquote roughneck of Team Hydro, Octillery, the ensnaring leader of Team Constrictor, and Golem, who they refer to as the most brutal member of Team Rumblerock. Obviously, they're all gung-ho, and their egos are so big they think they can take Groudon easily and save the day as heroes. But they're not heroes. We are heroes, and we are not going with them, so you know what that means. That's right, more optional mission. Until one day we wake to, that's right, more earthquakes. Ike comes running in, drags us to the square, and there we see exactly what we expected to see. The Special Ops team has returned, defeated, demoralized, and destitute. They reveal that despite all of their advantages, they couldn't even make it to Groudon, having been wiped out before they ever came close. Gengar comes down to talk shit to everybody because this game wants me to hate my favorite Pokemon so bad, and I do. But his shit-talking fires back, and it turns out that everybody else here are actual rescue teams who want to help people for actual reasons and also aren't shitty people. We do speak up this time and volunteer to go save Team Act and stop Groudon's rampage. Gengar runs away from confrontation after starting confrontation, like always, and nobody volunteers to go with us, but we go. Before we head off, we get another Gardevoir dream visit, where she tells us that our role is coming to an end, that whatever reason we were turned into a Pokemon is soon going to be fulfilled, and that she'll tell us everything when this whole world-ending thing is all over. At this point, Gardevoir is a worse version of spotted leaf warrior cats without any of the sexual tension, which is ironic given what kind of Pokemon this is. We grab Calamity Jane, as fitting, and head off to the Magma Cavern. While it looks like we'd be seeing a lot of Fire-type Pokemon here, what with the lava walls and the title and all, we mostly come across Pokemon that are weak to grass and water and make it through the first 23 floors without a problem. And then another couple floors of Onix and Steelix that are genuinely massive in this game and also die genuinely easily. Charizard and Tyranitar are down and out, crushed by Groudon. They tell us that their leader is still up ahead battling the Quake Lizard. Alakazam teleports out of there and leaves us to fight. Or at least that's what I think happened. I'm not really sure here. I don't know. Even though Ike's water gun is super effective against this foe, it only does 8 damage. 8 damage, super effective move. What the shit? I had a heart attack in this moment, but it wasn't worth having in the end. I don't even put this one to sleep, we just wail on him a little bit and he's out on the first try. The Wobbuffet and the training maze were harder than fucking Groudon. As it turns out, the Lord Lizard of the Earth and Quake 2 player extraordinaire is actually a pushover. I'm both happy and kind of disappointed. I think I might have been groomed by the prior difficulty of this game. Mount Blaze is like Poké Souls and then suddenly baby game? I don't know, but that's what it felt like. I was so surprised. This whole dungeon I was anxiously awaiting the game to get difficult again, and it never did. It was wasted anxiety, and that's fine, I guess. I mean, I won, but it's kind of underwhelming, especially after all that build-up. We return to the square with Team Act in tow, and it's all over. But wait, no it's not. Xatu telepaths in and lets everybody know that a massive meteor is coming, and will, without question, blast a hole in the planet. He tells us the only way to stop it is to fly high into the sky and find Rayquaza, who is the only one powerful enough to stop it from annihilating everything. Real doomsday stuff. Alakazam leaves to join Xatu at the Hill of the Ancients, where the two of them will combine their psionic power to create a teleportation stone that will get Team Solar, that's us if you've forgotten, to the Sky Tower, which we will then have to climb and find Rayquaza, if we have any hope of survival. In our sleep that night, Gengar, the shitlord himself, breaks into our house and attempts to eat our dreams, which probably also is a crime, right? Intent on exposing the truth of our heart because he is certain that the human inside of us has to be a scumbag. And you know what? Fair point. But before he can devour our StarClan-sent sex dreams, he's sent away by a glowing Navi-esque sparkle, and now we get to see our actual dream. Gardevoir is here and she is spilling tea. This is what we've been waiting for. She tells us that we were brought here to save this world, the world of Pokemon, and that we, whoever we is, she doesn't tell us that, sought a hero capable of saving everything, the world. But they, again, indeterminate, couldn't find one until they stumbled across a human, us, and decided that we would be that hero. They weren't seeking raw power or might, but true courage, and we possessed that. She says that we, the human, didn't believe in ourselves enough to be that hero, so we asked Gardevoir to put us to the test, a test of worth, and only if we were found to be truly worthy should we be told the truth. We, apparently, willingly, had our memories erased, and became a Pokemon of our own will to fight alongside those we would save. Saving the world from the meteor is our true task, and we will return to humancy after doing so. Clearly, we don't really want to do that, but Gardevoir is not really getting that at all. Also, she senses somebody enter our dream, but she can't tell who, and also this fact implies that she is not the one who sent away Gengar? Okay, I'm confused. There's a lot in here, in this section, that implies all sorts of weird shit. Like, maybe Gengar is the cursed by Ninetales human, or at least also a human, that maybe we're being manipulated heavily by this Gardevoir, and the we that she keeps mentioning, and that she's telling us we did and or decided all of these things willingly, which seems possible, sure, but also there's no proof, and it seems sketchy as hell, and why would we have to return to the human world? And also, there's maybe some other essence that is watching over us that saves us from the Gengar? and either Gengar or the weird Sparkle ran off crying, or maybe the Sparkle is actually supposed to be Gardevoir, and also maybe some other weird stuff that I may have missed. I don't know. This shit's weird, and there's some creepy undertones. I don't like this. Maybe I'm reading too much into a children's game, but I don't think so. I think there's legit theories about all this stuff out there on the internet, and there is like an entire post game, so maybe some of that's explained there, but as of now, I'm weirded out, and I've gone into full Charlie Day solving mysteries mode. Anyway, we say our goodbyes to all of our friends, pretending like they didn't just go on a legit manhunt against us, and then depart for the Hill of the Ancients to meet up with the psychics. They finish mind-melding the teleport gem into existence. Xatu mentions it was made by 3 of them, Xatu, Alakazam, and an unnamed ghost-type Pokemon that seems to have already left. Okay, we're moving past that. I noticed it, the game made sure I noticed it, but we're moving past it. The 3 of us teleport to the bottom of the Sky Tower, a cloud dungeon inside of a twister, and begin our ascent. It would have been too much to ask that we teleport to our actual destination, huh? The Pokemon here are a little bit tougher than what we've seen in most dungeons, but they're still pretty lackluster in terms of threat. The scariest and genuinely the most annoying Pokemon in the entire game live here though, ghost types, like Shuppet and Shuppet and Duskull. And these ghost types can travel through wall tiles, meaning they're not bound by the dungeon path, meaning that if you walk down a single tile width hallway, of which there are usually many, they can attack you from inside the walls and you can't do anything back. I spent 10 minutes just trying to get rid of this one Duskull. For reference, most battles in this game take less than 30 seconds, usually in the single digits because they only take a couple of hits at most. And here I am spending 10 minutes with this guy. But outside of the occasional frustratingly long haunting, the Sky Tower is not particularly challenging, just long. After 25 floors, we reach the Mamikon of our dreams and save the game. Going into this, I was anxious and a bit scared because there are 9 more floors after the save point before you reach Rayquaza, and I was still scarred from Moltres, so I was preparing for the worst case scenario where I lose the fight and then have to trek through 9 fucking floors before I can fight the boss again. Luckily, these 9 floors aren't that much different from the ones below, mainly adding Metagross, Salamence, and Tropius into the mix, which is a pretty cool combination of Pokemon. But they do have changing weather effects that can cause different conditions like damage from hail, which I thought was a neat touch. No other dungeon in the game had that up to this point, so good on you, Sky Tower. We carefully make our way up to the summit, arriving at the fabled Rayquaza, who immediately reveals that he's a hikikomori who hasn't once left the sky or touched the ground in the hundreds of millions of years that he's been alive. He goes on and on about how the worlds are destined to be separated and that coming here was a mistake that he will have to correct. Well, if he doesn't want to touch grass, this grass is going to touch him. We go for our typical strategy, sleep powder, plus moves only, plus grassless, plus ratio. And though Jane dies early on with no remaining reviver seeds to bring her back, Ike bests the sleeping god with a well-placed water gun. The sky starts to shake this time, and Ike tells Rayquaza to look up. I think he's never heard of Made You Look before, being a Sky Tower shut-in and all, so he actually does, and he finally sees the meteor hurtling toward us to commit extinction event. Rayquaza says he needs to know our resolve before he deals with the problem. He warns us that we will be caught in the crossfire. We're too close to both him and the meteor. Ike says, "So?" like a damn Chad, and Rayquaza fires off the hyper beam of every kid's imagination, destroying the meteor. We end up in wherever souls go when they die in the Pokemon world. But Gengar is there, waiting for us. He laughs at us and starts dragging us to the dark world, as he puts it. That's right, Gengar is taking us to hell. Yippee. And we can't do anything about it. But he suddenly realizes that he took the wrong path and can't tell which way is which, so he decides to leave us where we're at. We wake up, alive, on the Hill of the Ancients. Either Gengar is just that incompetent, or he's the biggest soon to ever dare and saved us on purpose. It seems like the latter because Ike immediately asks us if Gengar saved us too. Too? We wake up surrounded by friends and Lombre and celebrate the end of the world. We then collectively haze Lombre and all is right in the world. Gardevoir appears to show us her gratitude and tells us that it's time for us to go. Some holy light surrounds us, and we say our goodbyes as we float away into the place beyond. No shit, we're back. Protagonist. Finally, we've reached the end. Saved the world, got our souls sucked, and returned to be by the side of our best friend. Ike never ate a gummy, so his IQ is dummy low, literally as stupid a mudkip as you could possibly have at the end of the game. I never used a single Link move. I only caught 5 Pokemon in 11 hours, 12 hours, with an additional 2, Magnemite and Absol, just given to me through the story. Barely used any of them anyway. Did not use a single TM, gave up on orbs almost immediately after they were introduced, and I was under-leveled the entire game. I basically did a challenge run on my first playthrough. And you know what? I had so much fun. And there's still a lot to do after the credits roll too, like an overwhelming amount of post-game. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that the post-game has more content than the game. The main game has 14 dungeons, right? That's a lot. The post-game has 26. 30 if you count the Wonder Mail dungeons. Pokemon can now evolve because they couldn't before for story reasons. And you can finally catch all of the legendary birds, as well as new bosses like Kyogre, Mewtwo, Lugia, and the most famous meteor dweller of all time, Deoxys. Not to mention that there's tons of story content related to all of these things too. It's too much. It's just too much. There are so many answers yet to uncover too, like who was the human that got cursed? What happened to Gardevoir? Why is Gengar the way that he is? Will Ike ever get smarter? Where did this Doug trio go? Is this story really over? What is Makuhita's reward? And the biggest question of all, what the fuck is a link move?